Πολλοί Ελληνοαμερικανοί ντύθηκαν το χακί, να ξέρετε, στον αγώνα για την ελευθερία της πατρίδας μας. Και πολλοί επίσης βάδιζαν χέρι-χέρι με τον Μάρτιν Λούθερ Κίνγκ για να κάνουν τη χώρα μας πιο δίκαιη. Και Έλληνες και Αμερικανοί μαζί. Το κραυγάζουμε τον Γιάννη Αντετοκούμπο, ο οποίος βελτιώνεται κάθε χρόνο, γίνεται όλο και καλύτερος. Και αν θέλετε να υπέρτατο παράδειγμα της κοινότητας της σκέψης, της αποφασιστικότητάς μας, της αδελφής μας, μην πάτε μακριά, στρέφτε το βλέμμα στη Νέα Υόρκη, στο Ground Zero, εκεί που ασχολούνταν οι δίδυμοι πύργοι, εκεί που ανοικοδομείται η Ελληνική Ορθόδοξη Εκκλησία του Αγίου Νικολάου, που πριν από καιρό δεν ήταν παρά ένας σωρός από ερείπια. Πάνω απ' όλα όμως έχουμε χρέος στην Ελλάδα για ένα πολύτιμο δώρο. Την αλήθεια, την πίστη ότι ως άτομα διαθέτουμε ελεύθερη βούληση, έχουμε το δικαίωμα και την ικανότητα να κυβερνούμε τους εαυτούς μας. Εδώ ακριβώς, πριν από 25 αιώνες, στους βραχώδεις λόφους αυτής της πόλης, γεννήθηκε μια νέα ιδέα. Η δημοκρατία. Από το κράτος, την ισχύ, την εξουσία, το άρχιν, και τον δήμο, τον λαό. Για να μας έδωσε λοιπόν την αντίληψη ότι είμαστε πολίτες, όχι δούλοι, είμαστε όμως υπηρέτες της κοινωνίας μας. Μας έδωσε την έννοια της πολιτείας, του πολίτη, ότι έχουμε και δικαιώματα και υποχρεώσεις. Την πίστη στην ισότητα ενώπιον του νόμου, όχι μόνο για τους λίγους, αλλά για τους πολλούς, όχι για την πλειοψηφία, αλλά και για την μειοψηφία. Όλα αυτά είναι έννοιες που ανάβλησαν από αυτόν τον ιερό βράχο. Βεβαίως, ακόμη και τότε, οι πρώτες μορφές δημοκρατίας δεν ήταν τέλειες. Όπως και οι πρώτες μορφές δημοκρατίας στις ΗΠΑ δεν ήταν τέλειες. Τα δικαιώματα των αρχαίων Αθηναίων δεν αφορούσαν γυναίκες και σκλάβους. Όμως, ο Περικλής έλεγε ότι το πολίτευμά μας ευνοεί τους πολλούς και όχι τους λίγους. Μα γι' αυτό και αποκαλείται δημοκρατία. Οι Αθηναίοι ήξεραν επίσης ότι οι ευγενείς ιδέες από μόνες τους δεν αρκούν. Για να αποκτήσουν νόημα πρέπει να εμποδώνονται σε νόμους και να προστατεύονται από θεσμούς, να εμπεδώνονται με τη συμμετοχή. Και γι' αυτό συνέρχονται στην εκκλησία του Δήμου για να συζητήσουν για τα κοινά. Και εκεί κάθε πολίτης έχει το δικαίωμα να ομιλεί, να ψηφίζει για να τάσει ισχυρός ή με ένα βότελο, λευκό για το ναι, μαύρο για το όχι. Και οι νόμοι χαράζονταν σε μαρμαρινές πλάκες για να τις βλέπουν όλοι και να συμμορφώνονται. Και τα δικαστήρια με ενόρκους τους πολίτες μεριμνούσαν για το κράτος δικαίου. Οι πολιτικοί δεν ήταν πάντα βέβαια ευχαριστημένοι, γιατί κινδυνεύαν από εξωστρακισμό, από εκδίωξη όταν δεν άρχισαν τον λαό. Όμως, κατά τη διάρκεια χιλιετιών κατήχθησαν και άλλες ζωφερές απόψεις για την εκκλησία. Κατά τη διάρκεια της ιστορίας. Γιατί κάποιοι πίστεψαν ότι ο κόσμος δεν μπορεί να τα βγάλει πέρα από τη δημοκρατία. Ο κόσμος δεν αρέσει την αυτοδιάθεση, ότι προτιμάει να του λένε τι να κάνει. Γιατί ο ηγέτης είναι υπεύθυνος για την διατήρηση της τάξης, μέσω της βίας, μέσω της σιδηράς χειρός. Συναντήσαμε λοιπόν και άλλες απόψεις για την διακυβέρνηση. Κάποιοι πίστεψαν ότι ισχύει ο νόμος. Κάποιοι άλλοι πίστεψαν ότι ορισμένοι είναι ανώτεροι λόγω καταγωγής, λόγω πίστης, λόγω φυλής, λόγω συνοτικής καταγωγής. Και πολλές φορές αυτές οι απόψεις δικαιολόγησαν την κατάσταση, τον επεκτατισμό, την εκμετάλλευση, τον πόλεμο. Όμως, κατά τη διάρκεια αυτών των χιλιετιών, η φλόγα που άναψε εδώ, στην Αθήνα, δεν έσβησε ποτέ. ετράφη και από το περίφημο κίνημα του διαφωτισμού, αναζωπυρώθηκε από τους πατέρες του αμερικανικού έθνους που διακήρυξαν ότι εμείς είμαστε το έθνος, οι άνθρωποι, ο λαός, γιατί γεννηθήκαμε ίσοι και γιατί ο Δημιουργός μας έπλασε με τα ίδια απαράγραπτα δικαιώματα. Ακόμη και σήμερα, αυτοί που απειλούν αυτά τα ιδανικά. Ορισμένοι υποστηρίζουν ότι αυτά είναι για τη Δύση, είναι δυτικά ιδεώδη. Λένε ότι ορισμένοι πολιτισμοί, ορισμένες κοινωνίες δεν είναι έτοιμες για δημοκρατία και ότι προτιμούν την αυταρχική διακυβέρνηση. Εγώ θα μετά από 8 χρόνια ως πρόεδρος των Ηνωμένων Πολιτειών, μετά από τόσα πολλά ταξίδια, σε ολόκληρο τον πλανήτη. Δεν έχω καμία αμφιβολία ότι βεβαίως κάθε χώρα θα τραβήξει το δικό της δρόμο, γιατί έχει τις δικές της παραδόσεις. Όμως, αυτό το οποίο επίσης πιστεύω μετά από 8 χρόνια στη θέση αυτή, είναι ότι κάθε άνθρωπος απολυτά να ζήσει με αξιοπρέπεια, να έχει έλεγχο της ζωής του, να ελέγχει το μέλλον του. Κάθε άνθρωπος θέλει να είναι συμμέτοχος στην χάραξη του πεπρωμένου μιας κοινωνίας και ενός έθνους. Και αυτή η φλόγα αποτελεί οικουμενική αξία. Είναι μια φλόγα που σιγοκαίει στην καρδιά κάθε ανθρώπου. Αυτό λοιπόν και έναν Έλληνα επίσκοπο σε ένα βουνό να σηκώσει το λάβαρο της ανεξαρτησίας. Γι' αυτό και οι λαοί στην Αμερικανική Ήπειρο, στην Αφρική, στην Ασία αποτείναξαν τον ζυγό της επικιοκρατίας. Γι' αυτό και οι λαοί στο σιδηρούν παραπέτασμα περπάτησαν από τη σημαία της ελληνικής και ενώθηκαν με τις μεγάλες δημοκρατίες, τις δικές σας δημοκρατίες. Γι' αυτό υποστηρίζουμε σήμερα το δικαίωμα των Ουκρανών να χαράξουν τη δική τους πορεία. Γι' αυτό και υποστηρίζουμε τους Τινήσιους, τον λαό της Μιανμάρ, καθώς βρίσκονται τώρα σε πορεία εκδημοκρατισμού. Αυτό ήταν και ο ακρογωνιαίος λίθος της πολιτικής μου αυτά τα 8 χρόνια. Εννοείται ότι συνεργαζόμαστε με όλες τις χώρες. Πολλές από αυτές δεν είναι δημοκρατίες. Εξάγουν εκλογές, αλλά δεν είναι δημοκρατίες. Έτσι όπως τις εννοούμε εμείς, δημοκρατίες συμμετοχής και συνένεσης. Η τροχιά μας, η πορεία μας ως χώρας ήταν ανέκαθεν να υποστηρίζουμε τις προσπάθειες αυτών που πιστεύουν στην αυτοδιακυβέρνηση, στη δημοκρατία, σε αυτούς που πιστεύουν στις αξίες που γεννήθηκαν εδώ πριν από τόσους αιώνες.
Simply a matter of us being true to our values. It's not just a matter of idealism. I believe it is practical for the United States to support democracies.
Έχουμε τους δικούς μας λόγους να υποστηρίζουμε τις δημοκρατίες, εμείς, τους Αμερικανούς.
Because history shows us that
η ιστορία μας δείχνει
countries with democratic governance tend to be more just
είναι γενικά πιο
and more stable
πιο σταθερές
and more successful.
Και πιο επιτυχημένες εν τέλει.
Open democratic societies can deliver more prosperity because when people are free to think for themselves and share ideas and discover and create, the young people who are here, what they're able to do through the internet, technology, that's when innovation is unleashed. When economies truly flourish, it's when new products and new services and new ideas wash through an economy. In contrast to regimes that rule by coercion, democracies are rooted in consent to the governed. Citizens know that there's a path for peaceful change, including the moral force of nonviolence. And that brings a stability
Και αυτό ακριβώς φέρνει την σταθερότητα που εν γέννη ευνοεί την οικονομική ανάπτυξη.
The history of the past 2 centuries indicates that democracies are less likely to fight wars among themselves.
Τείνουν να διεξάγουν λιγότερους πολέμους μεταξύ τους.
So more democracy is good for the people of the world, but it's also good for our national security, which is why America's closest friends are democracies, like Greece. It's why we stand together in NATO, an alliance of democracies. In recent years, we've made historic investments in NATO, increased America's presence in Europe. And today's NATO, the world's greatest alliance, is as strong and as ready as it's ever been. And I am confident that just as America's commitment to the transatlantic alliance has endured for 7 decades, whether it's been under a Democratic or Republican administration, that commitment will continue, including our pledge and our treaty obligation to defend every ally. Our democracies show that we're stronger than terrorists and fundamentalists and absolutists who can't tolerate difference, can't tolerate ideas that vary from their own, who try to change people's way of life through violence and would make us betray or shrink from our values. Democracy is stronger than organizations like ISIL. Because our democracies are inclusive, we're able to welcome people and refugees in need to our countries. And nowhere have we seen that compassion more evident than here in Greece. The Greek people's generosity towards refugees arriving on your shores has inspired the world. That doesn't mean that you should be left on your own. Only a truly collective response by Europe and the world can ensure that these desperate people receive the support that they need. Greece cannot be expected to bear the bulk of the burden alone, but the fact that you are a democracy opens your heart to people in need in a way that might not otherwise be the case. Just as democracies are premised on the peaceful resolution of disagreements within our societies, we also believe that cooperation and dialogue is the best way to address challenges between nations. And so it is my belief that democracies are more likely to try to resolve conflicts between nations in a way that does not result in war. That's how with diplomacy we were able to shut down Iran's nuclear weapons program without firing a shot. With diplomacy, the United States opened relations with Cuba. With diplomacy, we joined Greece. With diplomacy, we joined Greece and nearly 200 nations in the most ambitious agreement ever to save our planet from climate change. And speaking of climate change, I would point out that there is a connection between democracy and science. The premise of science is that we observe and we test our hypotheses, our ideas. We base decisions on facts, not superstition, not what our ideology tells us, but rather what we can observe. And at a time when the globe is shrinking and more we are going to have to take collective action to deal with problems like climate change. The presence of a democratic debate allows the science to flourish and to shape our collective responses. Now, democracy, like all human institutions, is imperfect. It can be slow. It can be frustrating. It can be hard. It can be messy. Politicians tend to be unpopular in democracies, regardless of party, because by definition, democracies require that you don't get 100% of what you want. It requires compromise. Winston Churchill famously said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. And in a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural society like the United States, democracy can be especially complicated. Believe me, I know. But it is better than the alternatives because it allows us to peacefully work through our differences and move closer to our ideals. It allows us to test new ideas, and it allows us to correct for mistakes. Any action by a president or any result of an election or any legislation that has proven flawed can be corrected through the process of democracy. And throughout our history, it's how we have come to see that all people are created equal. Even though when we were founded, that was not the case. We could work to expand the rights that were established in our founding to African Americans, and to women, to Americans with disabilities, to Native Americans. Why all Americans now have the freedom to marry the person they love. It's why we've welcomed people of all races and all religions and all backgrounds and immigrants who strive to give their children a better life and who make our country strong. And so here, where democracy was born, we affirm once more the rights and the ideals and the institutions upon which our way of life endures. Freedom of speech and assembly, because true legitimacy can only come from the people, who must never be silenced. A free press to expose injustice and corruption and hold leaders accountable. Freedom of religion, because we are all equal in the eyes of God. Independent judiciaries to uphold rule of law and human rights. Separation of powers to limit the reach of any one branch of government. Free and fair elections, because citizens must be able to choose their own leaders. Even if your candidate doesn't always win. We compete hard in campaigns in America and here in Greece. But after the election, democracy depends on a peaceful transition of power, especially when you don't get the results you want. And as you may have noticed, the next American president and I could not be more different. We have very different points of view, but American democracy is bigger than any one person. And that's why we have a tradition of the outgoing president welcoming the new one in, as I did last week. And why in the coming weeks my administration will do everything we can to support the smoothest transition possible, because that's how democracy has to work. And that's why as hard as it can be sometimes, it's important for young people in particular who are just now becoming involved in the lives of their countries to understand that progress follows a winding path. Sometimes forward, sometimes back. But as long as we retain our faith in democracy, as long as we retain our faith in the people, as long as we don't waver from those central principles that ensure a lively, open debate, then our future will be okay. Because it remains the most effective form of government ever devised by man. It is true, of course, over the last several years that we've seen democracies faced with serious challenges.
Είδαμε ότι η δημοκρατία μας αντιμετωπίζει σοβαρές προκλήσεις
that have an impact here in Greece, have an impact in the United States, and are having an impact around the world.
Επηρεάζουν και ολόκληρο τον πλανήτη.
The first involves the paradox of a modern global economy.
Της σύγχρονης παγκοσμιοποιημένης
The same forces of globalization
ίδιες δυνάμεις
and technology and integration that have delivered so much progress, have created so much wealth, have also revealed deep fault lines.
Αυτές οι ίδιες δυνάμεις
around the world, integration and closer cooperation and greater trade and commerce and the internet all have improved the lives of billions of people, lifted families from extreme poverty, cured diseases, helped people live longer, gave them more access to education and opportunity than at any time in human history. I've often said to young people in the United States, if you had to choose a moment in history to be born and you did not know ahead of time who you would be, you didn't know whether you were going to be born into a wealthy family or a poor family, what country you'd be born, whether you were going to be a man or a woman. If you had to choose blindly what moment you'd want to be born, you'd choose now. Because the world has never collectively been wealthier, better educated, healthier, less violent than it is today. That's hard to imagine given what we see in the news, but it's true. And a lot of that has to do with the developments of an integrated global economy. But trends underway for decades have meant that in many countries and in many communities, there have been enormous disruptions. Technology and automation means that goods can be produced with fewer workers. It means jobs in manufacturing can move across borders where wages are lower or rights are less protected. And that means that workers and unions oftentimes have less leverage to bargain for better wages, better benefits, have more difficulty competing in the global marketplace. Hard-working families where their kids may not be better off than they were because of this global competition. What we've also seen is that this global integration is increasing the tendencies towards inequality, both between nations and within nations, at an accelerated pace. And when we see people, global elites, wealthy corporations, seemingly living by a different set of rules, avoiding taxes, manipulating loopholes, when the rich and powerful appear to game the system and accumulate vast wealth while middle and working class families struggle to make ends meet. This feeds a profound sense of injustice and a feeling that our economies are increasingly unfair. And this inequality now constitutes one of the greatest challenges to our economies and to our democracies. An inequality that was once tolerated because people didn't know how unequal things were, now won't be tolerated because everybody has a cell phone and can see how unequal things are. The awareness that people have in the smallest African village, they can see how people in London or New York are living. The poorest child in any of our countries now has a sense of what other people have that they don't. So not only is there increasing inequality, but also there's greater awareness of inequality, and that's a volatile mix for our democracies. And this is why addressing inequality has been one of the key areas of focus for my economic policy.
πρώτη προτεραιότητα της οικονομικής μου
In our
πολιτικής.
countries, in America,
Στις χώρες μας,
and in most advanced market economies, we want people to be rewarded for their achievement. We think that people should be rewarded if they come up with a new product or a new service that is popular and helps a lot of people. But when a CEO of a company now makes more money in a single day than a typical worker does in an entire year, when it's harder for workers to climb their way up the economic ladder, when they see a factory close that used to support an entire city or town, that fuels the feeling that globalization only benefits those at the top. And the reaction can drag down a country's growth and make recessions more likely. It can also lead to politics that create an unhealthy competition between countries. Rather than a win-win situation, people perceive that if you're winning, I'm losing. And barriers come up, and walls come up. And in advanced economies, there are at times movements from both the left and the right to put a stop to integration and to push back against technology and to try to bring back jobs and industries that have been disappearing for decades. So this impulse to pull back from a globalized world is understandable. If people feel that they're losing control of their future, they will push back. We've seen it here in Greece, we've seen it across Europe, we've seen it in the United States, we saw it in the vote in Britain to leave the EU. But given the nature of technology, it is my assertion that it's not possible to cut ourselves off from one another. We now are living in a global supply chain. Our growth comes through innovation and ideas that are crossing borders all the time. The jobs of tomorrow will inevitably be different from the jobs of the past. So we can't look backwards for answers. We have to look forward. We cannot sever the connections that have enabled so much progress and so much wealth. For when competition for resources is perceived as zero-sum, we put ourselves on the path to conflict, both within countries and between countries. So I firmly believe that the best hope for human progress remains open markets combined with democracy and human rights. But I have argued that the current path of globalization demands a course correction. In the years and decades ahead, our countries have to make sure that the benefits of an integrated global economy are more broadly shared by more people, and that the negative impacts are squarely addressed. And we know and we actually know the path to building more inclusive economies. It's just we too often don't have the political will or desire to get it done. We know we need bold policies that spur growth and support jobs. We know that we need to give workers more leverage and better wages. And that, in fact, if you give workers better wages, businesses do better too because their customers now have money to spend. We know that we have to invest more in our people, the education of our young people, the skills and training to compete in the global economy. We have to make sure that it is easy for young people who are eager to learn and eager to work to get the education that they need, the training that they need, without taking on huge amounts of debt. We know that we have to encourage entrepreneurship so that it's easier to start a business and do business. We know that we have to strengthen the social compact so that the safety net that is available for people, including quality health care and retirement benefits, are there even if people aren't working in the same job for 30 years or 40 years or 50 years. We have to modernize our infrastructure, which will put people back to work. We have to commit to the science and research and development that sparks new industries. In our trading relationships, We have to make sure that trade works for us and not against us, and that means insisting on high standards in all countries to support jobs, strong protections for workers, strong protections for the environment, so that even as we freely trade, people and workers in all countries see the benefits of trade in their own lives, not just benefits for the bottom line of large multinational corporations. These are the kinds of policies, this is the work that I pursued throughout my time as president. Keep in mind, I took office in the midst of the worst crisis since the Great Depression. We pursued a recovery that has been shared now by the vast majority of Americans. We put people back to work building bridges and roads. We passed tax cuts for the middle class. We asked the wealthiest Americans to pay a little more taxes, their fair share. We intervened to save our auto industry, but insisted that the auto industry become more energy efficient, produce better cars that reduce pollution. We put in place policies to help students with loans and protect consumers from fraud. We passed the strongest Wall Street reforms in history so that the excesses and abuses that triggered the global financial crisis never happen again, or at least don't start on Wall Street. And today our businesses have created more than 15 million new jobs. Incomes last year in America rose faster than any time since 1968. Poverty fell at the fastest rate since 1968. Inequality is being narrowed. And we've also begun to close the pay gap between men and women. We declared that health care in America is a privilege, not for the few, but a right for everybody. Today, our uninsured rate is at the lowest levels on record. And we've done all this while doubling our production of clean energy, lowering our carbon pollution faster than any advanced nation. So we've proven that you can grow the economy and reduce the carbon emissions that cause climate change at the same time. Now, I say all this not because we've solved every problem. Our work is far from complete. There's still too many people in America who are worried about their futures. Still too many people who are working at wages that don't get them above the poverty line. Still too many young people who don't see opportunity. But the policies I described point the direction for where we need to go in building inclusive economies. And that's how democracies can deliver the prosperity and hope that our people need. And when people have opportunity and they feel confidence in the future, they are less likely to turn on each other and they're less likely to appeal to some of the darker forces that exist in all our societies, those that can tear us apart. Here in Greece, you're undergoing similar transformations. The first step has been to build a foundation that allows you to return to robust economic growth. And we don't need to recount all the causes of the economic crisis here in Greece. If we're honest, we can acknowledge that it was a mix of both internal and external forces. The Greek economy and the levels of debt had become unsustainable. And in this global economy, investment and jobs flow to countries where governments are efficient, not bloated, where the rules are clear. To stay competitive, to attract investment that creates jobs, Greece had to start a reform process. Of course, the world, I don't think, fully appreciates the extraordinary pain these reforms have involved, or the tremendous sacrifices that you, the Greek people, have made. I've been aware of it, and I've been proud of all that my administration has done to try to support Greece in these efforts. And part of the purpose of my visit is to highlight for the world the important steps that have been taken here in Greece. Today, the budget is back in surplus. Parliament passed reforms to make the economy more competitive. Yes, there is still much more work to do. I want to commend Prime Minister Tsipras for the very difficult reforms his government is pursuing to put the economy on a firmer footing. Now, as Greece works to attract more investment and to prevent old imbalances from re-emerging and to put your economy on a stronger foundation, you'll continue to have the full support of the United States. And at the same time, I will continue to urge creditors to take the steps needed to put Greece on a path towards sustained economic recovery. So as Greece continues to implement reforms, the IMF has said that debt relief will be crucial to get Greece back to growth. They are right. It is important because if reforms here are going to be sustained, people need to see hope and they need to see progress, and the young people who are in attendance here today and all across the country need to know there is a future. There's an education and jobs that are worthy of your incredible potential. You don't have to travel overseas. You can put roots right here in your home, in Greece, and succeed. And I'm confident that if you stay the course, as hard as it has been, Greece will see brighter days. Because in this magnificent hall and center, the symbol of the Greek culture and resilience, we're reminded that just as your strength and resolve have allowed you to overcome great odds throughout your history, nothing can break the spirit of the Greek people. You will overcome this period of challenge just as you have other challenges in the past. So economics is something that will be central to preserving our democracies. When our economies don't work, our democracies become distorted and in some cases break down. But this brings me to another pressing challenge that our democracies face. How do we ensure that our diverse, multicultural, multiracial, multireligious world and our diverse nations uphold both the rights of individuals and a fundamental civic adherence to a common creed that binds us together? Democracy is simplest where everybody thinks alike, looks alike, eats the same food, worships the same God. Democracy becomes more difficult when there are people coming from a variety of backgrounds and trying to live together. In our globalized world, with the migration of people and the rapid movement of ideas and cultures and traditions, we see increasingly this blend of forces mixing together in ways that often enrich our societies, but also cause tensions. In the information age, the unprecedented exchange of information can also accentuate differences or seem to threaten cherished ways of life. It used to be that you might not know how people in another part of your country or in the cities versus the countryside we're living. Now everybody knows how everybody's living, and everybody can feel threatened sometimes if people don't do things exactly the way they do things, and they start asking themselves questions about their own identity, and it can create a volatile politics. Faced with this new reality where cultures clash, it's inevitable that some will seek a comfort in nationalism or tribe or ethnicity or sect. In countries that are held together by borders that were drawn by colonial powers, including many countries in the Middle East and in Africa, it can be tempting to fall back on the perceived safety of enclaves and tribal divisions. In a world of widening inequality, there's a growing suspicion or even disdain for elites and institutions that seem remote from the daily lives of ordinary people. What an irony it is. At a time when we can reach out to people in the most remote corners of the planet, so many citizens feel disconnected from their own governments. So, just as we have to have an inclusive economic strategy, we have to have an inclusive political and cultural strategy. In all of our capitals, we have to keep making government more open, more efficient, more effective in responding to the daily needs of citizens. Governing institutions, whether in Athens, Brussels, London, Washington, have to be responsive to the concerns of citizens. People have to know that they're being heard. Here in Europe, even with today's challenges, I believe that by virtue of the progress it has delivered over the decades, the stability it has provided, the security it's reinforced, that European integration and the European Union remains one of the great political and economic achievements of human history. And today, more than ever, the world needs a Europe that is strong and prosperous and democratic. But I think all institutions in Europe have to ask themselves, how can we make sure that people within individual countries feel as if their voices are still being heard, that their identities are being affirmed, that the decisions that are being made that will have a critical impact on their lives are not so remote that they have no ability to impact them. We have to make clear that governments exist to serve the interests of citizens and not the other way around. And so this is why, as President of the United States, I pursued initiatives like the Open Government Partnership that promotes transparency and accountability so that ordinary people know more about the decisions that affect their lives. That's why, both at home and around the world, we have taken steps to fight corruption that can rot a society from within. As authoritarian governments work to close space that citizens depend upon to organize and have their voices heard, we've begun the work of empowering civil society to defend democratic values and promote solutions to the problems within our communities. And as so many people around the world sometimes are tempted by cynicism and not being involved because they think that politicians and government don't care about them, we've created networks for young leaders and invested in young entrepreneurs because we believe that the hope and renewal of our societies begins with the voices of youth. In closing, our globalized world is passing through a time of profound change. Yes, there is uncertainty and there is unease, and none of us can know the future. History does not move in a straight line. Civil rights in America did not move in a straight line. Democracy in Greece did not move in a straight line. The evolution of a unified Europe certainly has not moved in a straight line. And progress is never guaranteed. Progress has to be earned by every generation. But I believe history gives us hope. 25 centuries after Athens first pointed the way, 250 years after the beginning of the great American journey, my faith and my confidence, my certainty in our democratic ideals and universal values remain undiminished. I believe more strongly than ever that Dr. King was right when he said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But it bends towards justice not because it is inevitable,
είναι αναπόφευκτο, αλλά επειδή
we bend it towards justice.
Εμείς το οδηγούμε προς την
Not because there are not going to be
δικαιοσύνη.
barriers to
Όχι
achieving
επειδή δεν θα
justice, but
αντιμετωπίσουμε
because there will
εμπόδια
be
προς την
people,
δικαιοσύνη, αλλά επειδή έχουμε ανθρώπους
generation after generation, who have the
γενιά
vision and the
με
courage
γενιά έχουν
and the
όραμα,
will to
θάρρος
bend the arc
και βούληση να στρέψουν
of our
τον
lives
κόσμο
in the
μας,
direction
την πορεία
of
της
a better
ζωής
future.
μας προς την δικαιοσύνη.
In the United States and in every place I've visited these last 8 years, I have met citizens, especially young people,
και ιδιαίτερα νέους ανθρώπους
who have chosen hope over
οι
fear,
οποίοι επέλεξαν την
who
ελπίδα,
believe that they can shape their own destiny,
ανθρώπους που πιστεύουν
who
ότι μπορούν
refuse
να
to
χαράξουν
accept
το
the world as
πεπρωμένο,
it is and
που
are
λένε όχι στον
determined
κόσμο
to
όπως
remake
είναι,
it as it
που είναι
should be.
αποφασισμένοι να τον ξαναφτιάξουν
They
όπως
have
πρέπει να
inspired
είναι.
me.
Και αυτοί οι άνθρωποι
In every corner of the world, I've met people who, in their daily lives, demonstrate that despite differences of race or religion or creed or color, we have the capacity to see each other in ourselves.
Είναι έτοιμοι να συνεργαστούν και να ξαναφτιάξουν τον κόσμο.
Like the woman here in Greece who said of the refugees arriving on these shores, we live under the same sun. We fall in love under the same moon.
Ζούμε κάτω από τον ίδιο ήλιο. Ερωτευόμαστε κάτω από την ίδια σελήνη, το ίδιο φεγγάρι. Είμαστε όλοι άνθρωποι. Πρέπει να βοηθήσουμε αυτούς τους ανθρώπους. Αυτοί οι άνθρωποι. Αυτοί οι άνθρωποι με γεμίζουν ελπίδα.
In all of our communities, in all of our countries, I still believe there's more of what Greeks call philotimo. Love and respect and kindness for family and community and country, and a sense that we're all in this together with obligations to each other. Philotimo. I see it every day, and that gives me hope. Because in the end, it is up to us. It's not somebody else's job, it's not somebody else's responsibility, but it's the citizens of our countries and the citizens of the world to bend that arc of history towards justice. And that's what democracy allows us to do. That's why the most important office in any country is not president or prime minister. The most important title is citizen. And in all of our nations, it will always be our citizens who decide the kind of countries we will be, the ideals that we will reach for, the values that will define us. In this great, imperfect, but necessary system of self-government, power and progress will always come from the Demos, from we the people. And I'm confident that as long as we are true to that system of self-government, that our futures will be bright. Thank you very much. Zito, Vielas.
Παρακαλώ, παραμείνετε στις θέσεις σας. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain at your seats.